Ladies and gents, welcome to GBX, and this is, could the euro replaces the dollar as the world's reserve currency? See what I meant, right? Like last time I said this, like you have this unique monopoly since World War II. Dollar is the tether, dollar is the gold standard now, world's reserve currency. Yeah, doing this is like catastrophic. Now I don't know, there is like 1 in a million chance or 1 in a billion chance it might work out well for America, but mostly it's like you have more to lose than to gain. You always had that case, right? That is how you have the biggest economy in the world. Not just biggest by far. 40 trillion. Second one is 20 trillion, which is just now, just past decade, China came that close. Third one is Germany, which is like 5 trillion. You have 8 times higher economy than the third place. You don't just get there unless you have some monopoly. Dollar being the world's reserve currency is one of them, right? That's why you can have higher debt and you can just like, raise the bar, like fuck it, like every other currency is tied to you. So yeah. So what is inflation at that time when it comes to dollar, right? If dollar drops, every other currency drops, right? So this is an interesting question. Could euro do that? I highly doubt that, because that would mean every other currency in the world kind of have to agree with that. And Europe doesn't have that good of a track record when it comes to like stability in the past. So I don't know about that. But we'll see. This is my channel, TLDR News Europe. This is a different channel apparently. So let's watch it.
For the best part of a century, the US dollar has been the world's dominant reserve currency. However, Donald Trump's protectionist policies, his upending of the global economic order, and a growing US debt pile now threaten to erode the dollar's reserve status. And this might actually already be happening. The dollar's value as measured against a basket of other currencies has actually been falling for the past few months, and this Friday, the euro surged to a 3-year high against the dollar, despite a pretty weak European economy and Trump's tariffs, which should in theory make the dollar stronger. As a result, some European policymakers now argue that a stable euro could attract investors searching for alternatives.
You say in theory, because of tariffs, dollar should be stronger. I get, but I don't think you take into account that tariff was done to every single country and every single thing. Dollar doesn't become stronger if you do that. Like tariff has to be like very selective. If you put selective tariff on things, yeah, dollar gets stronger. But not if you put tariff on everything.
The dollar, and even replace it as the world's reserve currency. So in this video, we're going to take a look at why the US dollar is losing its reserve status, and why some people think that the euro has the potential to replace it as the world's reserve currency.
I don't know.
We're getting remarkably close to 1 million subscribers, and currently 72% of you haven't yet subscribed. So lend us a hand and subscribe today. To get started, you need to understand.
Why do people still say that subscribe? Like even I said, like it doesn't mean much, right? Like a lot of people can subscribe, but like that won't matter. Even YouTube doesn't care. YouTube doesn't send a recommendation to everyone who subscribed anyway. Right? It's just like, it depends if you recently seen similar video or the same channel or not. Algorithm has changed a lot.
And the central role that the US dollar plays in the world's so-called reserve currency. A currency that central banks and other big financial institutions like to hold in their foreign exchange reserves because they're considered safe, in that their value will remain stable and that they can reliably be used to buy other things. The dollar's reserve status has its roots in the post-war Bretton Woods Agreement, when the US decided that they wanted the dollar to be the center of a new international monetary order. The dollar became the only currency that could be directly converted into gold, with all other major currencies then pegged to the dollar at fixed exchange rates. While the US ditched the gold standard in the early 70s, the dollar remained the world's dominant reserve currency, accounting for more than half of all reserves. Since its creation in 1999, the euro has held the second largest share of international reserves, and until about 2008, it appeared to be gaining on the dollar, increasing its share from 23.6% in 2002 to a peak of 27.6% in 2009. However, the Eurozone crisis in the 2010s, plus the fact that the US began growing faster than the EU in this period, undermined confidence in Europe, and the Euro's share of global reserves fell to 19% by the end of 2015. Today, the dollar still accounts for 90% of global transactions, and its share of reserves has remained at about 60%. Nonetheless, in the past few months or so, there has been some more substantive anxiety that Trump's policies could actually erode the dollar's reserve status. In short, Trump's unorthodox and erratic
Yeah, not to mention like Russia and even China has been in that kind of a mission to make sure that US doesn't stay like a gold standard type of way, right? Like a world reserve. So they had certain plans of like ditching certain reserves they already have to drop that percentage. But I think like these are like a statistic in a way that people can like manage if they needed to. So I don't think Europe, even if the number rises, like people would get behind the euro, because Europe has been like famously unstable. Not to mention Ukraine-Russian war doesn't help, right? So who knows where that's gonna go? Like entire Europe is arming right now. So people are not going to go behind that, like, okay, Europe might not be stable as we thought. So I don't think that's happening.
Economic policies have undermined the dollar's reputation as a safe asset. This became glaringly evident early this week when the American stock market fell at the same time as both the dollar and treasuries. Now, usually when the stock market falls, the dollar and US treasuries go up because investors are moving out of riskier assets in the stock market into nominally safe assets like the dollar and US treasuries. The fact that all three fell together early this week is proof that investors are actually just pulling their cash out of America altogether and no longer see the dollar as a safe asset, or at least not as safe as it once was. Anxieties about the surety of the dollar have been further exacerbated by at least three other things. One, the obscene...
Or it could be the other part, that they don't think Trump's going to keep this tariff. So they think this is temporary. So at best, they're pausing that investment. That could also be the case.
Amounts of debt that the US is currently issuing, sparking worries about either a default or the US inflating away its debt. Two, Trump's previous comments about devaluing the dollar to help America reindustrialize. And three, his antagonistic attitude to America's long-standing allies and his enthusiasm for sanctions, which has made some investors anxious about the prospect of Trump seizing their dollar-denominated assets. Nonetheless, the big question for de-dollarization advocates has always been, what could actually replace the dollar? You might think that the yuan would be a good alternative, but that's not really the case, for at least two reasons. Firstly, China still has capital controls that effectively limit how much money can come.
Yeah, in short, people are not going to trust China because it's China. Authoritarian in a lot of places, so it's really hard to get behind, right? China, if China becomes the new gold standard, yeah, most people are going to be afraid like China might as well be like emperor of the world at this point, so they're not going to do that.
In or out of the country via the CCP's influence over China's big banks. And secondly, the CCP actively devalues the yuan to keep its exports competitive. That sort of just leaves the euro then. As we mentioned a moment ago, until the Eurozone crisis, the euro looked like a real contender, but weak growth and a sense that the European project had essentially stalled dampened enthusiasm. However, if American growth continues to slow and the EU continues to move towards deeper integration, then the euro might become the least bad option. And counterintuitively, this process might actually be helped by the issuance of more euro-denominated debt, which is something we're currently seeing happen in both Germany, where incoming Chancellor Friedrich Merz has just scrapped the debt brake to allow for massive increases in defence spending, and at the EU level, where Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen is talking about issuing more joint EU debt to fund Europe's rearmament. This might sound counterintuitive. After all, you might expect that if European countries were issuing lots of debt, this would be a symptom of their economic weakness, and therefore...
Man, the war, you just said it, like they're arming themselves. If Europe goes to war, it doesn't make sense to make them like a world's reserve, does it? It doesn't make sense to make them, like gold standard, because it's basic thing at this point, right? Let's say like they become this world's reserve currency, and Europe goes to war, and they have to like inflate the currency more and more. Everybody's fucked. So yes, economical decision like Trump is making is fucked up. War is more fucked up. So yeah, this is not happening. This Euro is not replacing the dollar in that way.
Or make the euro less attractive as a reserve asset. But one of the big reasons that the dollar has been able to hold on to its reserve crown for so long is because treasuries, i.e. US debt, are the world's favourite debt instrument. You could even call treasuries the world's reserve bond. Again, somewhat counterintuitively, the fact that the US government borrows so much money, which involves issuing loads of treasuries, is perhaps the main reason that they're the world's reserve bond. And having so many treasuries floating about makes them attractive for two reasons. Firstly, they pay a non-trivial interest rate, and secondly, they're super liquid, i.e. you can always find a buyer for treasuries if you want to turn them back into dollars. This creates a sort of self-reinforcing loop. Dollars become more attractive to hold because they can always be used to buy treasuries, and treasuries become more attractive to hold because you know that they can always be sold for dollars, with both reinforcing the other's reserve status. Anyway, this is one of the reasons that German bonds, for instance, let alone EU bonds, have never really been able to replace treasuries. There just aren't enough of them floating about, which means that the market for them isn't particularly liquid. However, investors fled to German bonds last week when Trump's tariffs sparked treasury sell-offs. And if confidence in the dollar wanes at the same time that both Germany and the EU, perhaps the two most trustworthy entities in Europe, start...
Look, man, this is like saying if in summer, if sun intensifies more and more and like water becomes vapor, one day Pacific Ocean might dry up. Yeah, but let's be honest, it's going to take an immensely long time. Since World War II, USA has this, like I say, unique monopoly. Like there is enough structure in place that makes them like a really dominant power, dominant currency. Right? Like he just said, like, US Treasury, there's a lot of bonds, they can turn into dollar. It's like seamless in most of places. This is in a way like an infrastructure of currency like that. So in order to replace that, you need a lot of things, a lot of new things, right? And that takes a lot of effort. Like that shit doesn't just happen. So you really need to fuck up everything in order to do that. And I don't think like just Trump making decision is enough. If US go to massive war with China, and it is a catastrophic war, maybe then dollar might not be the world's reserve currency. I don't see this happening.
Issuing lots of new bonds. The euro and euro-denominated bonds could eat away at the dollar treasury complex. All in all, while the euro is unlikely to fully replace the dollar anytime soon, it could plausibly occupy a larger share of reserves as the world moves to, at least partly, diversify away from the dollar. And this story, like much of the news, is worth paying attention to in the weeks ahead, because with geopolitics in flux and Trump throwing the international order up in the air, there's a lot to keep an eye on. Every day we're faced with weird headlines, from Musk declaring anyone who looks at him the wrong way a terrorist to...
Yeah, okay. Look, there are these elements. Like I said, Europe has infamous reputation of being at war all the time. This very small period since World War II where they have not been at war, and even that changed 2 or so years ago when Russia said fuck it and like did the war with Ukraine. Now that fear is making Europe arm up, right? They are spending way too much in defense. Another wars might pop up. Europe is not stable. So euro is not going to be something that replaces the dollar. Maybe like you said, it might like try to balance the scale and like increase their bonds, and like US might not be as dominant as they are right now with the world's reserve currency. But I don't think dollar is going away. Yen could do it, like Chinese yen. But then again, like China is so authoritarian, right? What is it, precedent for life or whatever that is, right? Like, I don't think people would trust China. People are not trusting TikTok because it has some roots to China. Huawei got banned because government has a stake in it. Do you understand that? So I don't think like there is any trust there when it comes to world reserve currency. So I don't know what's going on. I don't think dollar has anything to worry about. And like I said, it has to be really catastrophic for people to like change this whole element of like replacing the dollar. Because enough infrastructure is there. I don't think that's going to happen. But yeah. Well, that was, could the euro replace the dollar as a world reserve currency? We have to ask this question itself. It's like a sign of problem. Because US is doing something that is threatening their monopoly, dominant monopoly that they have since World War II, which is not good, man. You have 40 trillion economy. That will go away. You are already like slowing down, right? People are already projecting like China and India in the future, mostly China. China will overtake USA. This will make it faster. Like, why are you doing that? Like, come on. I understand Trump's take. Like, we need to industrialize faster. We need to do something drastic, but not this. This is crude. This is like haphazard. Like, you need complex and smart things, not just like, fuck it, I'm gonna do this. I don't know, man. Alright, well, if you like my channel, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.